Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo.
They linked the whole missionary effort of the church, first of all, to the Trinity.
Today on Reflections, Father Bacik talks with Father Mike Tremmel, who is a member of the Toledo Diocese's mission in Zimbabwe. The topic of this week's Reflections is the mission of the church, meeting physical needs. And now, here is Father Bacik.
Mike, since you've been functioning as a missioner now for something like 3 years in Zimbabwe, I'd like to talk a little bit about the mission of the church and so on. Now, I was wondering how that time as being a missioner in Africa has affected you. What sort of differences has it made, and how do you feel about all of that?
Mm-hmm. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the pace of life. Not many people wear watches over in the area where we are. We're in a pretty remote area, and you tell time by the sun, watching the sun going across. And that there's a freedom of spirit that comes from that. Now that I'm home, I can just feel the pace is crazy.
Mm-hmm. Except you're in the rat race again.
That's right. And there's a sense there, it's a bit more of a contemplative kind of life, where there's a lot of traveling, a lot of time for us on the road to get to the villages where we're going, a lot of distances, long distances, or even once we reach a place after a given, meeting or a service with the people, then we're often walking off to the villages, maybe, 4 or 5 miles. So there's a different sense of time, and that would be one thing that affects me the most.
And you probably see it when you come back here in the United States, huh? I mean, that's when you begin to notice the new pace. I remember in a minor way, I was living in New York City for a while, and then moved to a very tiny community, and I remember just marveling myself at what a pace I had been on, and I never realized it while I was doing it, and it was only afterwards that I could look back on it and say, my heavens, how did I ever do that, or how different this is. I would think there'd be something similar with you.
Yeah, I don't feel it as much now. I've been back, a month and a half or so, but the first couple of weeks I found myself just standing around watching everyone go by and rushing by. There's another part of that with the pace, that people in our area have time for each other. I might be all packed up and ready to go out to one of the villages, and 2 people come by, and if I didn't take the time to stop and visit with them, it'd be taken as an insult. So you can't be in that big of a hurry on all occasions.
There would be an expectation that way. When you say there, you're talking about Zimbabwe. Why don't you just locate us a little bit? We're in southern Africa, right?
In southern Africa, Zimbabwe was formerly called Rhodesia, and since independence in '80, it's been called Zimbabwe, which means House of Great Stone. It's a landlocked country. House of Great Stone.
Stone.
And
why that?
Well, there's one area of Zimbabwe called the Matopos area, and a lot of connection or respect for the ancestors goes back to that area, and there are huge rocks sort of piled on top of each other. And then in another area called Masvingo, there are also large, huge rocks. They're almost like mountains of rocks where a village actually existed, a very developed village, say back in the 1500s or even before, which was a very organized type of society out of the Shona culture. So the name of the country comes from that area.
Now, you deal with the Tonga tribe, don't you? And then you talked about the Shona culture. Why don't you just say a little bit?
The Shona culture, would come out of the people of the tribe called the Shona people, which is the major tribe in Zimbabwe. We're with the Tonga people, and they're located in the northwestern part of the country.
And are only 1% of the population.
That's right.
Like
just
that.
a small group. Yeah.
Now, the Shonas, how big a percentage would they be?
Probably about 75% of the country.
And then therefore they dominated. So are the government officials Shona?
A lot of the government officials, or a majority, would be Shona, although now with the sense of national unity in the country, there are a lot of Ndebele, which would be the other major tribe in Zimbabwe.
Are there major cultural differences that you see between those tribes or know about?
Well, there would be both similarities and differences. The greatest difference would be that of the language itself and mannerisms that are there.
Now, is there an attempt in the country to get everyone to speak one language?
No, there isn't. There's still an attempt to have each respect their own tribe and culture. And I think the way they've done that is by their choice of having English as the business language. English is the language taught in the schools. English is the language used at the banks. It enables them to have, the most beneficial contact with countries in Africa and throughout the world that way. And it still leaves them able to respect their own tribe.
Mm-hmm. So they have a sense of cultural diversity.
That's right, yeah.
Very interesting.
And a lot of them know all the different, languages.
Oh, they could speak
They
them.
can speak one another's languages, yeah.
Even your Tonga people could do that?
The Tongas especially, because they've
had to.
They've had to go out, because often, more often than not, people don't know Tonga. So after we leave our area, we can't use Tonga unless we run into another Tonga person or someone who's been in contact with them.
You know some of the Tonga language now yourself, don't you?
Yes, yes. I wouldn't say I'm fluent, but we manage.
You've made an effort at it, I know that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have our services in Tonga. The people that we visit in the villages don't speak English, so we use Tonga there. Mm-hmm. I can preach in Tonga and converse all right. So.
That's wonderful. How long did it take you to learn that?
A year and a half. I'd say at least a year and a half to 2 years. But I'm still learning. I go out with a little notebook, and each time I learn a new word, I write it down. And but it's a great tool for conversation with people, and just the fact that you're interested in learning their language means so much to them.
I can imagine they appreciate that. If you hear Shona people talk, can you understand them at all?
I can only.
Are there similarities?
There are some similarities, some words that I can catch, but I wouldn't say that I understand Shona at all.
So they are somewhat different.
They're different, yeah. They're all called Bantu languages. Bantu is the word for people. Or tribes, and that would be, because of that, there's some similarities. I think the word for God is Mwari in Shona, and in Tonga it's Mwami. I don't know what it would mean, specifically in Shona, but in Tonga, Mwami means chief. So when we call God Jesus, Jesus is our chief, is the way it would be translated.
Well, Mike, let's talk a little bit about the whole missionary effort there, and to try to place this maybe in some sort of theological context. Our Catholic bishops in the United States have tried to do that through a pastoral statement on world mission that they've given us in 1986. It's called To the Ends of the Earth. And I think that missioners like you generally think that's a good document, don't you?
We think it would be it's an excellent document, and one that's important for people to read. I found a couple things that really struck me. One is the fact that they say any local church can judge its own success and renewal by the way that by looking at their missionary efforts. So if it sort of becomes the barometer, if you will, of how faithful we are to the gospel. At least it's an essential one.
I noticed that in this pastoral statement, which they call it, not a pastoral letter, but they link their effort to the peace and economics pastorals, and see it as a continuation of that, and they try to build on those two great statements. Most people have become aware of the pastoral letters of the bishops on the topics of peace and on the economy. They've gotten a lot of press and so on. Now, this document, To the Ends of the Earth, well titled, has not gotten that kind of publicity and probably never will. We couldn't expect it. But it seems important that we begin to reflect on it and try to get the thinking in this document into our general education programs, into our sense of what the church is all about. Just on the very basis that you talked about, it is a judge of our own vitality and our own fidelity to the gospel, whether we do have this missionary outlook and practically try to carry it out. Notice the bishops try to place this in a theological context, which is probably worth looking at. They link the whole missionary effort of the church, first of all, to the Trinity. That they see, in God himself we find this procession and this sending, and that we see the Father and the Son sending the Spirit, for example, the sending out, and they wanted to help us to understand that whatever we are about flows out of the very structure of our understanding of God. That's a nice starting point. Then they go on to talk about the urgency of this mission, and they talk about Christ, and he says, this is the time of fulfillment. The reign of God is at hand. Reform your lives and believe in the gospel. And so there is an urgent sense in the whole of the scriptures, and especially the New Testament Gospels, where Jesus is always telling people, now's the time. Let the dead bury the dead. You go about those other things later on, but you got to decide now. There's an urgency because the kingdom of God is at hand. We got to get about this, and we have to carry it on. And I think that then they go on and they want to say, well, Jesus chose people, his disciples, to share in this work. His cause was to spread the kingdom. Now he shares that cause with us. He tells us we must be witnesses to him, even to the ends of the earth. We find that in the Acts of the Apostles. So that's perhaps as a way of setting the stage for what we want to say about this work of the church. The church is to be missionary by its very essence. It shares in the Trinitarian life, and it shares in the mission of Jesus Christ to go out and witness. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to spread the kingdom. And as the Second Vatican Council told us, we're supposed to be signs and instruments of the kingdom of God in the world. So that might form sort of a theological perspective within which we look at the kind of concrete work that you do and the kind of missionary attitudes we're trying to inculcate in many other people.
There's the sense of, let's say, letting the light of Christ, or allowing the light of Christ to shine to the ends of the earth, and that's something that we all have a share in doing, whether we see the light is shining in our own cultural situation here in the States and in our church communities, or in our situation in Zimbabwe. We often have to let the people decide how the light is shining in their culture. So in part of our missionary task, I think, in being with the people is letting them look at their problems, not just spiritual, but economic and physical difficulties, and seeing if there can be some light shed upon that. It's a part of Jesus' mission continuing in the world today.
One of our difficulties in all this is trying to figure out what it means to spread the kingdom, I think, and the bishops, again, in their pastoral letter on missionary efforts, which is called To the Ends of the Earth, have a section where they talk about a holistic approach, a word that's become common in psychological circles these days. And in there, they talk about various hungers. They talk about the human hunger taking two forms, sort of a spiritual hunger, and then they also talk about a social hunger. It may indicate the presence of oppression, preventing people from developing in an atmosphere of peace and justice. In a human being, in a society, in the world, when one member suffers, all suffer. So they want us to see this missionary effort as having a holistic dimension to it. And I wonder if we could look concretely, Mike, at how you try to do this. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you actually do in your missionary efforts with the Tonga people in the northern part of Zimbabwe, and that'll help us to get a feel for what this document is telling us.
We're a group of 5 members of a pastoral team there, and also 4 others who are volunteers who work with us. 3 of them are teaching, and 1 assists us in development work.
Now, you are sent out by the Diocese of Toledo, aren't you?
That's right. The 5 on the pastoral team are all from the Diocese of Toledo, and the 4 in teaching and in development work are from different countries. And they're sponsored by the Zimbabwe Catholic Church, and have been asked to live with us in the Binga area, which is the town where we stay in.
Binga is the name of the town?
The name of the town, and also of the governmental district of that whole area. They're living with us there to walk with the Tonga people. So our ministry is in some ways manifold, or there are many approaches. On the one hand, we do our outreach in pastoral work, which would be the formation of small faith communities where people want to gather. There's an interest to come together and to sing, a basic interest in the people to come together to sing.
Really?
To dance together.
They just sort of naturally do that when they gather?
And they pray together. They enjoy spontaneous prayers. We've given some shape to that in an approach called gospel sharing. And gospel sharing is a simple 7-step method that they use in their villages. So they'll meet on a Thursday, which is a day they don't work in the fields, a day to honor their ancestors. They meet in various people's villages, maybe 10 or 12 people, no more than 20, in these small groups. And they take a gospel passage, and in an hour's time, let's say, they'll invite the Lord to be with them. Someone will say a spontaneous
leader
prayer.
Spontaneously emerge within the group?
That's right. Well, it would be someone who can read. It's usually how the one who reads is, but although it doesn't have to be that, but he's really more like a facilitator, and his job is to just lead the people through the steps where they invite the Lord, and then he pauses and someone says a prayer. Then he invites someone to read the text, and they read it a couple times, and then he invites them to choose 2 or 3 words out of that strike them. So then for 5-10 minutes, and that's the most beautiful part of it, they just share 3 or 4 words from that passage that strike them. And then there's a time of quiet reflection, more singing, and then they share what that word says to them in their hearts. And then after that they decide what is God calling them to do in their community as a result of that passage.
Sounds very much like the base communities we know developing in Latin America and even here in the United States. Now, is that a structure that your missioner task force there suggested or worked through? Or, I mean, how did it... I mean, I understand they come naturally together to sing and to dance and so on. Now, how did all that evolve that you're telling me?
Well, just the use of this gospel-sharing method in the small Christian community comes out of the mission of the Diocese of Hwanghae. We're linked with some other missionaries and other local priests and sisters who are there. So we actually learned this method from them. And I wanted to say this mainly because it's a part of our pastoral work, but also already within the gospel sharing, there's response to the community needs. Now, after that gospel sharing, the people will probably go right to a village somewhere to pray for someone who is sick. Or they will decide while they're together what needs to be done. Maybe it's to help with making bricks for the school building or whatever it could be, but there's like a concrete action that they do following their reflection on the gospel.
It sounds like the old Christian family movement, the CFM that we knew here in the United States at one time.
A whole other aspect of
again, Mike, I'm trying to get a feel for the development of that whole methodology. The people you learned it from, is that an indigenous approach, or were there missioners from outside who came in and suggested, let's do it this way?
I think what originally it would have come from local people, some of the indigenous people who were trying to apply what is the best way for us to form our Christian communities. And together with missionaries from the outside, they've come up with this approach called small Christian community. And a lot of it, I think, was reflecting with the Latin American, South American scene of the basic Christian community. Yeah.
And do the Tonga people take to that easily then? I mean, does it feel natural and right to them?
Very much so. They especially like meeting in their villages. And they feel that, God is visiting them whenever someone else comes to visit them. So they're honored by that. It's so important for them to have visitors and for them to visit each other. So when we do that as church, it means so much to them.
Now, if you were sitting in on one of those small group gatherings, would you play any active role?
No, not necessarily. I only would if they're struggling with the method itself and they have some questions. But usually, most of them have it down. Once it's taught, it's a fairly simple process. So I just go in as a member of the group and participate, sharing as they share.
That's wonderful.
It's easy, isn't it?
Well, if it's easy. Again, I remember the CFM where the priest, the idea was the same thing. If the priest came, he wasn't allowed to talk.
Oh, I see.
And only said something at the end. It was a great learning experience, as I remember it. And it was because you weren't trying to figure out what you were supposed to say next, and you could actually listen. And I would think that you would be learning that way as well.
Yeah, it's for us. I mean, there's always they look to us for some kind of insight, some kind of direction, and expect us, I think, as a assistant of the church or a worker of the church, to offer a different or a new perspective to what they're seeing, or to feed back to them what they're already sharing. So there's a real openness for us to share as well. Although, the temptation we have to fight is not to dominate and to let
Right.
it come from them. Because, we only visit these places once a month, and in between there, they're running their own services. They meet on Thursday for the gospel sharing, but then on Sunday, they lead a Sunday service. So we train, that's a lot of our work is simply enabling people. We gather them together, groups from various faith communities, and teach them how to preach and to lead the service, and to where people have been baptized to give out Eucharist. So there, I heard I was at a meeting in Mansfield where people were talking about priestless Sundays and what to do about that here in Northwest Ohio.
You have a lot of experience with that.
And the people, well, I would say the people there have a lot of experience
Yes.
with that, and they've been doing it for one group that we're with is very developed in third, fourth generation Catholic. So, and they've been living without a resident priest or pastoral worker for 10 years, and they're one of the most vibrant communities in the diocese.
And what is their Sunday service like then?
The Sunday service, it's basically like the Eucharist or the Mass, with the exception of the prayer of consecration. And they process in, they wear robes, they except their Sunday service there is a little longer than ours. They go for about 2-3 hours.
Do they really?
Yeah. Even when I'm there, when I feel I'm preaching a longer time, or we go 2.5 hours, they say, Father, when you're not here, we go even longer.
Why?
They enjoy the coming together. It's something they look forward to.
How would that 2.5 hours be spent? Give me sort of a breakdown of what would happen during that time. The structure would be the liturgy of the Word and then the sharing of the Eucharist.
Except that everything just takes a little longer time. The song, if they're into singing the glory to God in the highest, they'll sing it 2 or even 3 times. The prayers at the petition time are spontaneous, and they go, they're kind of lengthy prayers.
And people would easily chime in on that, would they?
Very much so, yeah. And they listen to each other as they pray and find out a lot about what other people are struggling with and how the Lord is active in their lives.
It gives them a sense of needs then that they need to respond to. Huh?
And then the announcement time at the end of the service goes for maybe 30 minutes, just because there aren't as many newspapers, or communication is done by visiting and by talking. So the fact that people come to church gives them a chance to find out what's happening in the community.
There's a real time of sharing for them. I noticed you said at the Thursday service that they read the scriptures twice. Do they repeat them on the Sunday service?
No, well, in the villages where people are beginning in new faith communities, we do that, and we follow the gospel sharing method on Sundays there as well until they have that down. But often, because the people, they're not used to being read to all that often, and much more used to conversation and storytelling and visiting, we use just one reading rather than using all 3.
I see.
But in a more developed church where people have been baptized and have celebrated the sacraments for years, then Mass.
Are you saying that in some of these groups that would meet on Thursdays that some of the people would not be baptized?
All these aren't that I'm referring to.
They would not be baptized.
They're not baptized. We take about a 2 or 3 year process for the catechumenate. And now when I go back, a lot of the communities, we probably have a lot of people ready for baptism now. And they do all the teaching themselves and training of the people.
So you have a 2 or 3 year process.
So things are slow. It's a
well,
long
what
process,
percentage of the Tonga people in your area there would be Christian?
Probably 5 or 6% at this point. Just a minority of people would be Christian, and maybe about 400 or 500 Catholics in our area. But now we have about 1,000 catechumens, and spread out throughout the Binga district, and it's a developing, growing church.
Well, that's fascinating. Then I take it, Mike, that this is to pick up on that holistic approach suggested by the bishop's pastoral statement to the ends of the earth, that your social activity part, the justice part of the reaching out, it flows out of those small groups as well. Am I correct in that?
That's right.
That they would, in reading the scriptures and then talking, they would see there's a need, and then they go out and act on it. Then maybe even right away.
And they also see us involved in that. We have one volunteer, a layman, he's a Belgian volunteer, a Catholic, who is with us and goes out to the villages with us, and then he follows up on any projects that they want to do. He's helped them they've wanted some drought-resistant crops like cassava, and he's introduced that crop with them. And they've wanted to work together in some cash crops to raise some money for their church or for their own survival. And they've been growing some corn and groundnuts and sunflower and beans, and have had some success with that. Mm-hmm. Another group is burns bricks, and another group is trying to build a school because their children have to walk 15 miles to get to school, and they aren't going the distance. So they're working. He works together with them on some of those development projects. When we're there, we also sometimes need to take care of healthcare situations. We're often become the ambulance driver, and or even become involved in first aid or treating some of the minor illnesses that people have.
Mm-hmm. So it's really the base community, as I would call it, that is the central vehicle of your outreach to these people. And it allows it to be a real indigenous effort. In other words, it's their business. And it combines both prayer and work for the betterment, the physical betterment of the people.
That's right, and it's their task to find leaders to walk with them and guide them. If they can't find the leaders to come to courses or to be involved in who aren't true to their work, then we don't go to those places, and they know that. So we're trying to help a church become self-sufficient.
Mike, it's all fascinating. I could tell you could talk for hours about this. You're filled up with it. You've been over there for 3 years and obviously have tried to assimilate and learn. And it's fascinating. And I keep thinking there's so much for us to learn from all of that. Just listening to you, there's so many ideas that would come that maybe we can take from their experience and incorporate into our own outlook. So we want to think of the church as a missionary church, and we're trying to carry on the mandate of Jesus to spread the good news to the very ends of the earth. And in the process, we not only try to give to others, but are able to receive. And just to listen to you, Mike, I get a feel for what that is in the concrete. Thank you.
You've been listening to Reflections with theologian Father James Bacik, lecturer and campus minister at the University of Toledo. Today, Father Bacik talked with Father Mike Tremmel, who is a member of the Toledo Diocese's mission in Zimbabwe. The topic of this week's Reflections was the mission of the Church, meeting physical needs. If you have any comments on today's show or suggestions for future programs, please write Father James Bacik, Catholic Campus Ministry, 2086 Brookdale Drive, Toledo, Ohio, 43606. Funding for this program was provided by the Catholic Communications Commission of the Diocese of Toledo.